was an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Derry Girls, Episode 6, the finale of Season 1. In this episode, there's an issue with the paper, and Claire comes out. This inspires all of our friends to join together and have each other's backs in a moment which seems like the world could use a lot more of that when we see what's going on at home. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Ashleigh for commissioning this entire series. Ashleigh's here in the chat. She says, sorry for the delay with the last one. Not a problem. I am just glad because I went and watched it pretty much right away after recording on the fifth one. And I realized belatedly that maybe you were going to want me to watch it live because it was a finale that was a potential possibility and that I had ruined that. So I'm just relieved that it turns out you wanted this to be a regular episode because I was like, oh man, I almost did that one other time. So I was just like wanting to make sure that I didn't make that mistake again. So this episode, y'all, this is tonally a lot different than any of the others. And it was a very, I think, smart move to make this the finale episode because it's, you know, this show, while it is dealing with a lot of it's dealing with a lot of pretty serious themes, really, but it's all sort of couched in the humor of the situation, you know, like the overall day-to-day sort of silliness that you have to live with when you're in a country that's going through the kinds of changes and upheaval that they're going through. It sort of falls to the background a little bit. You know what I'm saying? You just become sort of desensitized to how not ordinary things are really. That the things that you've learned to live with every day, how you have just taken it for granted for years that your family vacates town because a bunch of bigoted old men march through and act like assholes. That's not a normal thing. So what I feel like the show did really well, Melanie's saying, oh my gosh, Natasha, oh my gosh, what? I don't know. But what I think this episode did very well was remind us that sometimes, even when you're used to everything, there will be something that breaks through that is still really shocking and horrifying. And that you have these periodic reminders that you can get used to anything, and that's a bad sign, you know? And I feel like in the United States, we are really particularly starting to see that kind of crop up where people are not fazed by hate crimes the way that they were 20 years ago. And there's even the instant a hate crime happens, there's an assumption that the other side did it to make that side look bad kind of thing. It's all so cynical and considered to be really, it's all seen as political machinations that are very distant from our particular lives. And until one day it slaps us in the face and reminds us that no, you're still part of this. You have a responsibility. Oh, Melanie says she was laughing that I watched the episode early. Yeah, sorry. Ashleigh says, yeah, the military presence and such is just normal background stuff until it's suddenly very not. Yeah. And very topical these days. Exactly. So it's actually really poignant moment, the last episode. And and the last moments of the last episode, it's really the last minute that reality kind of comes crashing down and you're like, oh shit, okay, I guess we're going to get serious here. And again, probably in like 2 weeks, things will have gone back to quote normal. But for right now, it's a reminder to everybody that like, this is not how it's supposed to be. You shouldn't have to raise your kids in this sort of like, and I actually looked into it after I watched this the first time. The bombing that's being talked about on the news in the end of this episode is not actually a bombing that happened. I thought that this was like a particular event because like the guy on the news is saying one of the most like brutal attacks. But it's not actually based on anything. It was just meant to be a kind of a shocker, like come to Jesus moment. It's, I don't know. I just found this really touching. So let's start off this episode because it really does start off in sort of the way that they like in a similar tone to all the others. And it just starts to take a turn once we have this news story come out, because I have to say the moment that Claire says, I just don't want to be involved, Erin, I was like, oh, it was Claire who wrote this. No shit. So when she winds up coming out, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And I am really excited that the show has her dealing with that coming out and has it be really like such a weird combination of people like trying to be supportive and doing what shitty folks would call quote virtue signaling, where they want so much for everyone to know how down with the gays they are, but then when it comes down to it being one of their close friends, they handle it so poorly that friend then feels totally betrayed, because that is a true experience for so many people out there, that their friends are all about something and are really supportive in theory. And then when it comes to actual practice, they have no fucking idea how to conduct themselves. They don't know how to act, you know? Ashleigh says, I feel like you can't really watch this show without thinking about Brexit, the Irish border, etc. It's very much a warning of what's at stake by not considering NI in that entire mess. I support the gay, even though I myself am not gay. Exactly. So we start off with her mother questioning her aunt and saying, I just find it a little difficult to believe. And her aunt is sitting there at the table, not looking at her. And she's obviously like just done her nails. So she's like not touching anything, but it all gives a real vibe of like being a police officer questioning a suspect. And it turns out that Mary is just after dark clothing so that she can do a dark load. I'm going to out myself here and say that I don't do loads of darks and whites and colors. I know you're supposed to. I have absolutely no doubt that it does help with preserving the color fastness of your clothing, and that overall everything would be brighter and cleaner looking if you did not wash them all together. Guess what? I still do it. Like Owen, when I first moved in, he separates his whites from his colors at the very least. He doesn't have a like brights and darks. That he doesn't do. But he separates whites from colors. But what happens is that there aren't enough whites, usually. I hardly own a single piece of white clothing. Owen owns white t-shirts and some white socks. And not enough. He doesn't wear them often enough. So a lot of times, that basket of whites will sit for like 3 months, because we don't even notice that stuff isn't clean because we wear it so rarely that it not being available is completely like not a problem. So I'll do it, but I just completely I'll do it because he has it already separated out, and I guess, but I always just get so like frustrated by the whole process of separating them out, because when you only have 2 people in the house, her preoccupation with having really enough to justify a load I completely understand that. And that's where I'm at with like whites. If I don't have enough, I don't feel like I want to do a whole load of them. And then they just sit there. Oh, I totally understood here. Irish mammies, says Ashleigh, at least from my own experience, are pretty militant about putting on darks, whites, and colors. It's too easy to fill the basket in a family of like 5 or 6. Yeah. I think that's really the clincher, is that it will be totally, 2 days before you've got each of those filled up. But in this house, a month goes and it's still not done. Melanie says, you forgot to say this will offend the snowflakes to your clothes washing reveal. Oh, God. Guys, I saw a tweet the other day, and it was a woman who tweeted, I know this will trigger the snowflakes, but yes, conservative women wear bikinis. And it was like one of the weirdest tweets I've ever seen, because it's like sort of suggesting that liberals or Democrats don't wear bikinis. I don't even know exactly what it was that she was trying to say, to be honest. But it just struck me as so funny that she would say, I know this will trigger the snowflakes, but, and then say something that was that sort of nothing. And I decided that I was going to have a new like status that started that way several times a day. So I've been posting, I know this will trigger the snowflakes, but it's been really rainy here today. Just like nothing sorts, and I've been posting those because it just irks me so much, this whole snowflakes thing. Oh, guys, I get so mad about it. Anyway, so we have this whole scene where finally the girls come in from school and she sees them all wearing their uniforms, and she's really excited because they're all, it's all darks. They have their skirts and blazers, which I didn't think those blazers could go in the regular wash. I would have thought that those were dry clean only, but I guess a woman's got to do what a woman's got to do. And then eventually she says that she wants their whites, and we see later that something happened to those, and now everybody's whites are pinks. And I enjoy the fact that there's something like that sort of like visually pulls them together when they're in the hallways and whatnot. I just thought that was a pretty like cute visual cue that didn't need to be there or anything, but I just liked it. So we have the amazing revelation that Orla is now addicted to stepping. Guys, do you know how much I love this plot development? Like, I can't find words strong enough to adequately express what genius I think this is. And I'm not being funny. The idea that somebody is a prodigy in something that there's no, like, what does that even look like, right? It's so weird and stupid and pointless. It's like, I'm trying to find like an adequate comparison for something that has no impact on the world whatsoever, and I can't even come up with anything else that's as good of an example. But I adore this because, even if you picked something as in my opinion, sort of silly as like being amazing at a particular video game, there are video game conferences and tournaments and stuff that you can go compete in and actually win money. So it's not like that's even as useless. Step is nothing. It's nothing. And the way it's talked about, guys, Orla, first of all, snaps at James because he blames her for a plate not being clean. And Sarah chimes in and says, I warned you, Orla. You're putting yourself under too much pressure. Can't fail, Mammy. And Erin, misunderstanding, says, since when have you been troubled by exams? And Orla says, exams? What are you on about? What are you on about, Orla? Step. I'm sorry? Step aerobics. And Sarah, her instructor, says she's a natural. She says she's got what it takes to go all the way. And Mary's just like, all the way in step aerobics. But it's out of control now, Mary. She's stepping morning, noon, and night. Apart from anything else, it's dangerous. She nearly came through the ceiling yesterday. Okay, she might be gifted, but I want her to have a normal childhood. You guys, honestly, best dialogue ever written. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. I love it so much. And it particularly speaks to me as well, because I have been getting a lot more into like going to gym led classes over the past 2 years or so. So I have been going to, cardio fitness classes and Zumba classes and like combo, like strength training, cardio classes, kinds of things. And the idea, like, I am not going to lie to you. There's a meme that's been circulating where somebody says they're writing it as if a script, and they say makes therapists laugh, and then thinks to themselves, good, I made therapists laugh. That means I'm doing good and I'm going to get a good grade in therapy, which is a totally attainable thing and something that's very normal to want. And I love that meme because it speaks so much, I think, to our generation specifically, in which people talk about like participation trophies. And I think they misunderstand what actually happened there. Because, I mean, obviously there's the argument about like who gave us the trophies and now you're blaming us for them. But apart from that, participation trophies made it so that we became even more competitive in some ways, I think, because we were like, well, everybody's going to get this trophy. So in order to stand out, I need to do a whole lot extra to prove that I am really like a whole other echelon of excellent compared to everybody else. And we were also one of the first generations that it was like really pounded into our heads that for all of us, we needed to go to college. And so having all of these people suddenly being like, oh no, college is kind of a requirement if you want to get a decent job. And we're all competing, spoiler alert, to get into the same colleges. And we all have the same fucking like shit on our resume. We started to get obsessive about being the best and about being able to prove very much on paper, like concretely, that we were the best. So this weird competitiveness with step, something that is nothing, that you can't be best at, it's nothing, feels so true and real to me, because when I am in Zumba class, I would be lying my ass off if I told you that I wasn't constantly conscious of the fact that the teacher is watching all of us, and I want the teacher to notice me and notice how good I'm doing compared to everybody else. And I want the teacher to come up to me after class and be like, oh my God, you should be a Zumba instructor. You're so good at this. Absolutely. That is what my secret little heart wants. 100%. So this thing, while so stupid, also feels like the pettiest, stupidest part of me being brought to life on screen, and me being shown exactly how nothing that is, this like weird desire of my heart. And it's simultaneously hilarious and also kind of an indictment. And it's genius. And it just, some things just really ring true to you in a way that feels like somebody has seen you, as they say. I feel so seen. That's what I'm feeling. So yeah, I am all about this weird little like subplot. I really love this. Okay. So I won't give up. I can't. Let's go to the Photoshop. Guys, these Photoshops, remember when these were a thing? I'm sure they're still a thing in places. I think the CVS near our house has like a photo section because there's, you know, still people want like actual printed photos that are printed properly and not printed on the friggin' shit ass printer gloss paper that we all try and pretend is just as good quality and almost never is. I'm pulling a Sarah and fixing my lip gloss. How's that? This scene is probably, in total, from beginning to end, one of the best minor plot points of any comedy I've ever seen. It feels like something straight out of Seinfeld in a lot of ways. And as much as I really hate Jerry Seinfeld, he is just such a shitty person. Seinfeld is an amazing comedy. And this feels right, like it fits right in there, but is somehow like it's simultaneously less mean-spirited than Seinfeld, but also like more mean-spirited. So we have Joe coming in and sneaking up on his son-in-law, who is getting the pictures of his wife's birthday party. And he comes in and accuses him of like meeting his fancy lady, as he puts it. And he needs to get these photos from this dude. Now, I wish that I could like post photos in the chat so that you guys could all see what I'm looking at right now. The dude in this moment has the craziest teeth I've ever seen, and I can't tell if this is a real, like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna post this on the in the patrons group in the comments, this little image, because I can't tell if this is a prosthetic thing that they did on purpose to accentuate how nuts this dude looks, or if it is a genuine, like, this is genuinely what he looks like. I can't tell. But he has gums twice the size of his actual teeth. And it looks nuts. Combined with the way that he's looking at them, this guy immediately, you're like, he needs to be medicated. Either he needs to be or he already is. And he took too much. Like, this dude is too enthusiastic. And so this whole thing, what is her father's name? Greg? He's standing there and he's like trying to find, he's like, do you have the docket? Yeah, I do. It's a wee red slip of paper. About yay big. Yeah. Dark blue lettering it has. Yeah, I know. Not a navy blue, more like a royal blue. I know what it looks like. Times New Roman, I believe the font is called. Back and forth. It's amazing. Do you absolutely need it? I'm afraid I do, sir. Yes, proof of ID. But do you have my surname written on there? How do I know it's your surname? Because I told you it was. You could be lying. Why would I do that? To get your hands on someone else's photos. Oh, and then Joe decides that he's going to chime in. Gary. Thank you, Ashleigh. Is it Jerry? Jerry. It looks like it should be Gary because I don't see a G and think that that's a soft G. I'm picturing if it said Jerry, that's a J. But it's Jerry, not Gary, right? I think I'm right. Oh my God. Anyway. Joe in this scene deciding that he is going to hang this guy out to dry and not help his ass one little bit is so cruel and so hilarious. I love it deeply. I love it. There's no reason for it whatsoever. And later on, he like kind of comes to his senses and realizes that like he's hurting his daughter really because this was her birthday and her photos. But in this moment, he cannot resist fucking with this dude that he just hates so much for no good reason. There's something like when you have a plot point in a comedy of everybody hating a particular character, you have to be really careful about it because it can be easy for you to like turn the corner and make it so that you feel really, really bad for the person. And it's no longer funny and just seems bullying. So it's a very, I've always been fascinated by that particular type of, like, I don't even want to say subplot, more like a through line in comedies and especially ensemble casts, because I feel like mostly it's done pretty well in the comedies that I like. And I can never quite figure out what the magical formula is for that, because I'm thinking now like about Gary Gergich in Parks and Rec, for example, and he is a perfectly nice guy with amazing smart ideas a lot of the time, who is incredibly kind-hearted and generous, and yet everybody makes fun of him and hates him. And it's like one of those things that like, why? But it's also super funny. If it were life and I saw people treating somebody who's perfectly nice, like Gary Gergich like that, I'd be like, what is your guys' problem? This guy is so nice. But it's a combo of the people who dislike him, disliking him so out of proportion to what he's actually done, that in itself is funny. And then it's how much the person who's being hated lets it roll off their back. So Jerry is just sort of like bemused by Joe and like just often sort of like, why are you like this guy? But he never like seems particularly downtrodden by it. It's just something that he's like learned to deal with throughout his life. It's just been this way and he's just grown to understand it. And I think that is like, it's just such a tricky thing, guys, so yeah, I really, really loved this whole scene. One of my favorite moments is after he's like, this is my father-in-law, he'll vouch for me. And Joe says, I've never seen this man before in my life. And then this kid grabs the photos back and goes in back, and Joe turns and looks over at Jerry, who's looking at him like, are you serious? And he just gives a shrug. It's like he genuinely, it's like a moment of Jerry looking at him being like, why did you do that? And Joe genuinely not having an answer for him. What? I don't know, just to fuck with you, just to ruin your day. What's the big deal? And that shrug is so expressive and so hilarious. I have seen this episode now like 3 times and I cannot help but laugh every single time, because it's almost like Joe himself doesn't even understand really why he's doing it anymore. It's so automatic that he doesn't even think about it, Ashleigh says, Joe doesn't even seem to really mean it. It seems to be largely banter. I mean, the way he comforts Jerry in the last scene, he does care for his son-in-law. He just has a funny way of showing it. I feel like you're giving him more credit than he deserves, Ashleigh. Like, he puts a hand on the guy's shoulder when they found out about a terrible bombing. And I feel like that moment is not meant to be like, oh, he really cares all the time, he just doesn't show it well. I feel like that moment is meant to be like, this has rattled them all so badly that Joe is even willing to be supportive to Jerry, whom he never does this with. I took that as sort of like the reverse of what you're talking about. As this is a big deal, and here's how big a deal it is, that I'm going to put my hand on your shoulder. And I enjoy the fact that it feels like Joe is sort of just on autopilot with this, because there are people that you get like that with. I feel like people you work with, have you ever caught yourself, somebody that you've grown to dislike for totally unrelated reasons, they just say something so innocuous, and you catch yourself thinking, oh yeah, you would think that, you stupid prick. And then you have to stop and be like, wow, he was not being unreasonable at all, and I really need to chill out. What the fuck was that? Because I've most definitely run into that myself. seen myself, like, stepped back and been like, wow, Natasha, you reacted really weirdly to that. And I realized that it's only because of who said it or who did it that I have, like, a totally different response to it than I would if it was anybody else. So that's how I sort of think of Joe, is that he is, like, just completely in this, like, routine of finding fault with Jerry every single moment that he gets the chance. And it's just a complete reaction now. So anyway, yeah, this scene where he's trying to get his photos back, he winds up just having to leave. And then we cut to the school newspaper. Themes: bin lorries, life in the year 2000 ? There's a bunch of photocopying that needs to be done, and Erin, who obviously, like, wants to be part of this, is just being treated like an errand girl. She's supposed to make these copies, go and get some tea, yada yada yada. We get to see some of the pages of the school newspaper, and it's called The Habit, apparently, which is kind of genius. I kind of love it. And it just looks it looks like a zine. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know if you guys ever had school newspapers. I had, allegedly, a school newspaper, and I swear to God, I saw like one copy ever. And I remember there was an article during which I learned the meaning of true shade. One of these kids had written this thing, and the whole article was supposed to be him kind of going up against the faculty on some principle on something. And he said, and I approximate this quote, but it's pretty close, I think, to what it was, because I was like, wow. He said, and of course, our staff, with the infinite wisdom bestowed on them by their vast community college education. I remember reading that and being like, they let you print that shit? Like, it was just so cold. But yeah, I only ever saw like one copy, and that was the one. And other than that, I feel like it was either it wasn't circulated much and nobody noticed it, or it was the kind of thing that like constantly got sidetracked and the actual printing of it really, really rarely happened. So they're talking about entries for our Searching for Myself writing competition are to be placed here. If you could all spread the word, that'd be fabby-dabby-doo. Oh, brother. So as she says this, the sister comes in. And apparently there's this girl named Louise Kerr who is in the hospital. Now, refresh me, guys. Do I know who this is? Am I supposed to know who this is? Just because I'm not totally sure that I missed something, or if they mentioned something in a previous episode. Ashleigh says, I don't think she's ever been mentioned. And she says the school it's filmed in has actually started making a school newspaper of the same name. Oh, that's fun. That's a fun idea. Well, apparently she's in the hospital and it's not looking good. It's unlikely she'll be returning to school before the end of the year, so I think the only thing we can do now is, and one of the girls interrupts and says, pray for her? No? What use would that do? No, I think the best thing we can do is decide who will fulfill the role of editor now. So, first of all, sister, thank you for being just so ruthlessly amazing. But also, everybody decides that they are not going to be able to step into Louise's role and have a clear conscience. They feel like it's disrespectful. So they have decided that they are going to let this next edition slide, that they're not going to publish. And the sister at first is like, all right, well, that's fine. And then Erin interrupts and says she'll do it. And all of these girls are horrified They're like scandalized is more the word I want, where it's just like, that is simply not done. And you are going against what all of us have agreed off on your own without consulting with any of us. And it feels very disrespectful. And it's a combination of her like spitting in the old editor's face, but also spitting in their faces as they, quote, try and make a statement. As Jenny says, you're ruining our statement. And Erin obviously has just gotten so like fed up with having to play gopher that she's going to seize the moment that she can to get a role of some kind of importance. And I adore this. So she feels so proud of herself. She goes home and like announces that I got made editor of the paper, and nobody even pays any attention. She does not care at all. And I find it like it's a combination here, because when she comes in and she says that and nobody pays attention, if it happened the way that she purports it to have happened, I would really feel a lot of sympathy for her having a big moment that her family doesn't seem to give any shits about. But because I know that the girls in the hospital and Erin did what nobody else like had the cold-heartedness to do, the fact that everybody chooses to ignore this big announcement feels really fair to me. And that's sort of mean, but I stand by it. Meanwhile, Jerry is looking all over the place for his friggin' little docket. And everybody's yelling at him about the fact that, of course, you need to hold on to that. How could you even go back there without it? And especially Sarah is like disgusted because she was so thin in those photos that her collarbone was like sort of poking through her skin, as she puts it. And she really wanted to have some photos to commemorate that period of weight loss for her. Which, you know what, as horrible as it is, hashtag relatable. I really get it. I think all the time, you know, I talk about how glad I am that I've grown up in an era where, for us, we weren't under the same kind of scrutiny that kids are today. We didn't have social media. There weren't cameras everywhere. There wasn't video of everything. But at the same time, I was so self-conscious about my body because I thought I was fat. And I did not allow pictures to be taken of me. And so there are a few out there from prom and, you know, dances mostly. But I wish at times that I did grow up during this era so that I could have all of those kinds of photos to commemorate moments like that. I just think about it a lot. And so these moments of her just being like, well, I looked really thin and I just wanted to have that. I'm like, yeah, I get it, lady. So finally, her mother goes and pulls the whites out of the dryer. And she's like, oh, I think I figured out what happened to the docket. And she holds up this shredded bare piece of red paper and a pair of what apparently had been white corduroy pants that are now pale pink. And I just want to take an aside here to mention how 90s corduroy seems now. For men, not so much. Corduroy is kind of timeless for men. But for women, corduroy is a very 90s thing. You don't see corduroy for women out there that much right now. So I really like that choice of it. Because I had like 2 pairs of corduroy pants in the 90s. And it's not like I looked great in them or anything. I just loved the fabric. I loved the tactile nature of the fabric. So we have Erin going to school in her pink shirt that is supposed to be white. And everybody's sort of staring at her like, the hell is going on with this? She is doing her little slow motion strut and then swoops past her friends with barely a word, almost completely ignoring them. And they all turn and stare at her like, oh, okay. And Michelle, I think, is the one who's like, dick. And she swoops into the library or the AV room or whatever it is that they're using. announcing loudly, "Good morning, team," anticipating a crowd of people waiting for her. And there is nobody there, except for one girl who pokes her head out from behind one of the computers and tells her, "Everyone quit because they think that you're ruthless and cold and nobody really has any respect for you at all, actually." And Erin misunderstands and is like, "Well, I'm really glad that you came. And if you're willing to face this challenge, then I am too." And she's like, "Yeah, no, I'm here because I left my inhaler. Bye." So Erin follows her out and is yelling about how she has her own people and they are shit hot, I tell you. Shit hot. Which I'm going to take Erin's word for it that that's a thing. But I must confess, I have never heard somebody say anybody was shit hot. And that feels like a really poor combination of words to try and get across that people are good at something. That doesn't do it for me. Shit hot. I don't like it. So I am imposing a moratorium on it. And inevitably the friends that she snubbed in the hallway, she calls upon to please come and help her in her hour of need. And they do, but they're not good at it. They're not helpful. Orla, for her part, is off in the corner stepping because she can't let her heart rate down for whatever reason. And there are all of these terrible ideas that Sarah is writing on the board. Animals, shoes of the world. I think there was another one. I'm trying to see the board here because she's talking about celebrities that look like animals. And I love that James is just like, "Yeah, none of this is anything. There's a couple things that she says and he's like, "Can you elaborate?" Because he's clearly trying to be supportive and get it, but he's realizing that he's not getting it because there's nothing to get. Shoes of the world. And that involves, this is a piece that would concentrate on different shoes from around the world, sitting alongside pictures of, different shoes from around the world. And he says, okay. So how in Russia they wear boots because it's Baltic, and in India they wear sandals because it's boiling. So that's it, is it? I'm not totally convinced by either of them, if I'm honest. And she turns and stares at them and is like, "Oh, God, this is garbage." And she looks like she wants to cry. How can we print this utter shit? So, what does she do? She decides to totally break confidentiality. And I will say, as much as this is a shady thing to do, there's no name attached to it. So they aren't outing anybody specifically. But she takes the one of the writing assignments from Out of the Box, Searching for Myself, and decides that they are going to publish The Secret Life of a Gay Teenager and put it on the front page. And everybody thinks that it's James. This was written by a girl. A real-life lesbian walks among us. Orla says, "I don't really believe in lesbians." Which I'm just like, they're not Santa Claus. What does that mean? And Claire says, "You can't do that. We'll get in trouble. Big trouble. You're not afraid of a bit of controversy." "Yes, I am. Something like this could go on our permanent record, Erin." "What's more important, Claire, your permanent record or telling this poor girl's story?" And she holds it up. And Claire says, "My permanent record, count me out," and storms out. And at this point, it had not occurred to me yet that it was Claire. It wasn't until later when she's like, "No, I'm not taking part in this." But obviously, Sister Michael is just, no, there's no way that you guys are going to be able to publish this and hand this out. This is a Catholic school. You can't just go posting a whole story about lesbians. Like, what do you even know? This isn't happening. For God's sake, what happened to Shoes of the World? This is more important. This is about gay rights. I see. And I take it that's what the camp shirts are in aid of. A very serious uniform violation, by the way, but let's take this one problem at a time, shall we? So she tells them they are absolutely not to distribute this. And James says it's censorship, to which she agrees. Well done. You are correct. You are being censored. Now go. And hustles them away. But in a beautiful little moment that I loved and will cherish for the rest of time, in the morning, when it turns out that they have gone against her wishes and are indeed distributing this all, despite what she ordered them to do, Jenny decides that she's going to step up and be the smug little Percy shit that we all love to hate. And it turns out that Sister Michael hates her in much the way that we do. And even though Jenny is backing her up on what she herself said earlier, she looks at this girl's smug, superior expression and is just like, no, you know what? I think I'm going to let this one slide, actually. Yeah, go ahead and distribute those. That's fine. And walks away. Didn't you hear me, sister? You know what, Jenny? I don't think I did. That is a good moment, y'all. Big ups to Sister Michael for that. I liked it a lot. Just the whole, I always am excited when we get to see somebody who is in such a position of authority and who is so often like, seems like so detached from the things that we care about. It's so fun to see them have the same reaction to somebody that we can't stand as we have, you know, like it's the moment of looking at her and then you see it, like her turn it over in her mind and then be like, no, you know what? Fuck this bitch. I'm here for it. So it eventually comes out, pun intended. Claire comes out and admits to Erin that it was her who wrote the article. And Erin does that thing right away where she's just like, well, I'm not really interested in you in that way. And, oh my God, Claire's response, I'm not interested in you in that way. Look at the state of you. Claire, that's the best. I love you so much for that. Let's see. Oh, Ashleigh says, I don't think it's so much that she's saying it out of dislike of Jenny, but more so that she had to walk the party line the day before, but is low-key supportive and gonna just pretend she hasn't seen them disobey her. Can't agree, Ashleigh. Did you see the way she looked at Jenny's face? I really strongly feel that it's her hating Jenny's attitude in that moment that made her go, you know what? Fuck you. Yeah, I'm letting him do this because you suck. Because I urge you to go back and like watch that exact moment that I'm talking about. Because I really get the feeling that it's Jenny being like, you need to put a stop to it. And the way that she says it and holds her nose up and sort of smirks to herself like, I've got the authority on my side. It feels really much like there's no doubt in my mind that it's a private petty moment that she's having. I would love to think that it's just that she's supportive and she's like decided that that would be a nice touch. And I wouldn't even doubt that that's true, that she probably is supportive, but like that one moment for me was really distinct. So yeah, I'd be interested because Ashleigh's saying I need to go back. I don't need a lot of convincing to go back and watch Derry Girls. Yeah, go back and watch it and then tell me what you think of that. Because did you guys look at the comment that I left about that kid's teeth and the gums? Do you see the picture? Because it is terrible. Okay. But yeah, so Erin is just really weird about the fact that it was one of her friends who wrote this. And understandably, Claire is really hurt by this and says, I really thought that you'd understand. And takes off. And we cut immediately to Erin at home feeling really shitty. And I was really glad that there's no period of her being like, well, I was right and this is weird and what the hell. It's pretty much right away that she feels ashamed of herself and it's just like, I fucked up and she's my friend and I can't believe I acted like that. And I'm just disappointed in myself too, which that's a valid thing. I appreciate that it doesn't take her long to get there. And she goes to the talent show that is happening the next day at school. Guys, I participated in some talent shows in high school, and I always enjoy performing. Look at what I do for a job now. But there are some, I would always kind of take offense when I could see how much my parents were not excited to have to go to a talent show. But then I would stand on the sidelines and listen to one of the girls, oh God. Do you guys remember? There was a song by Jewel. And I remember this so distinctly. I feel kind of bad because I can't hear the song now and not hear these two girls singing it. But it was two different girls who they auditioned separately for this this show. And the director decided that neither of them was really quite good enough to get a solo. So he decided to put them together to sing in harmony a pretty difficult song by Jewel. And it was one of the most difficult things to sit through. I wish so much that I had a tape of it because there's no getting across just how off it was. They weren't in harmony. They weren't even on the same words at the same time. The rhythm was completely off. And this moment of Jenny singing, I just can't. She sings so much too. Because there was another episode that it opened with her and this other crew singing. And it was the worst thing. And I love that this actress is willing to just humiliate herself. Because it's really, really bad. But so she goes up there and she's singing. Meanwhile, Erin is feeling bad because James walked away from her because he is also very disappointed in the way she's handled everything. And she's realizing that everybody's sort of dropping her because she sucks. And Orla is the next up on the docket to perform. And I'm going to leave this and come back to it because I want to go back to the cracking clavicle. Because Sarah is trying on different perfumes at the mall. And her father is trying to reason with the nut job behind the counter to try and get some kind of, deal with him so that he can just take these damn photos. And this kid doesn't want to hear it. He won't accept the shredded up docket that came out of the washing machine or the dryer. And she walks in and is like, you should give this a whiff, Dad. And this kid stops and says, it's you. And she's like, what? And he says, from the photos, can I just say you have one cracking clavicle? And she puts a hand dramatically to her chest and is like, I don't mind you saying that. I don't mind at all. And later on, he's at home with her. Like, she's dating this guy. I really want him to appear in season 2 and for them to still be dating. But he's also such a weirdo that he makes me deeply uncomfortable, and I can't, I'm like, I bet he would make for good comedy though. So like, I still kind of want him around. So I just wanted to wrap that up because I enjoyed that a lot. So let's go back to Orla, because this bitch, listen, when I realized she was going to be doing step, as much as that is the dumbest thing, I kind of was like, well, you know what? I bet you could do step somewhat entertainingly. Probably. I bet you could make this work. Ashleigh is saying, do you remember before I mentioned they changed at least one song in this season? It was the song Orla used for her performance. It was supposed to be Madonna's Like a Prayer. Okay, you know what? Because that actually ties in, Ashleigh, with what I was going to say, which was the way this song goes does not at all go with the movements that Orla's making. Like, the song is called something something prayer, but it's not actually the rhythm of it, and the moments that she chooses to like move and stand are not going with her movements. Like, the timing of it doesn't match up. So I was watching it and I was just like, this doesn't have to be as bad as Orla's making it. I don't know what she's doing up there, but it's just like a missed opportunity, big time. And at first, everyone is just sort of puzzled. They're watching her and they're just like, what is she doing? And then, as it becomes clearer and clearer that she's just doing a step routine and that she's like jumping over the step and just doing a bunch of like nothing, people start to laugh at her, understandably. And the louder the laughing gets, finally somebody just says she's such a dick. And it's the girl from the first episode whose sister is the big girl that nobody wants to fight with, who gets up in their faces and completely calls their bluff about beating her up. But yeah, Erin says she might be a dick, but she's my dick. And as she stands up and says that, Claire looks over at her and says, no, she's our dick. And they go up on stage all together. And they all try and follow along to Orla's step routine, like they're in class and like she's the teacher. And I really loved that the camera pans from them over to Sister Michael's face. And she has a look on her face of like begrudging tenderness. Like she's touched by this and it annoys her a little bit that she's so touched. But she is, and she can't help it. I loved it. And then we cut to the family in the living room seeing the news about the bombing and sort of holding each other and being really horrified and shocked. And we cut back and forth between that and this moment of like real friendship and support and love between a bunch of kids who are still separated enough from the world that they don't know quite how bad it is yet. And the adults know. And it's their job to keep the kids from knowing just how bad it is. So they're absorbing that so that the kids don't have to like be in it the way that they might otherwise be. And I just really loved it. I thought it was such a beautiful ending. It was surprising because it was so sort of dark and melancholy for a show that has been so fun. But I felt like the show has been really unusual in that it has been able to incorporate dark themes pretty well throughout. And they decided to sort of face up to it that, like, really in the end, it's not funny. We can try and make light and we can make it work within our lives as best we can. But when it comes down to it, it's not funny, you know? And I thought that was really well done. So that was a good episode. Thank you, Ashleigh, for commissioning this show. This was a delight. I can't wait for the next season to come out. All right, everybody. Well, I am behind my time, and I have another episode that I'm going to be doing shortly, so I will be seeing you all soon. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and for watching this show. We love you. And by we, I mean me. I love you. You're great. So, hopefully I'll get to see you soon. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.